We're visiting tonight with Dr. Jim Garrow. On September 3rd, you may recall, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina said in response to blocking Iran from developing nuclear weapons these words: "Those nuclear weapons in the hands of terrorists could result in a bomb coming to Charleston Harbor." That's according to a report from CBS Charlotte. Now, why would he say a thing like that? Why don't we find out in just a minute on Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Jim Garrow, it only takes a Gulf of Tonkin, a 9/11, a few things like that, some deeper research into the events that led up to the attack on Pearl Harbor and all the way back to 1941, before you become a little false flag shy. And a couple of months ago, there was a report that surfaced. It actually it popped up on the scope of even mainstream media for just a minute, and then it was gone. And it was about a transfer of nuclear weapons from Dyess Air Force Base up to South Carolina. Then Lindsey Graham came out there and said that thing about those nuclear weapons in the hands of terrorists could result in a bomb coming to Charleston Harbor. And then the next thing I hear is that a weapon was actually detonated in the Atlantic Ocean about 600 miles off the Carolina coast, producing a seismic reading of 4.5 on the Richter scale. Would you mind just getting all over that? And then a bunch of high-ranking military men were fired, and they said, it's got to do with drinking and gambling. And you look at these guys and go, that guy drinks and gambles to the point where you get fired from a position like that? The whole thing just... it just looks like another one of those Bravo Sierra stories that come out there, and then people get distracted and go on about their business. But apparently these weapons were transferred from Dyess, and apparently the normal method for transferring these weapons was not observed, and the firings did in fact happen. So could you just tell us everything?
Be happy to, actually. Keep in mind my contact. One of them is directly with one of these three gentlemen who was fired, and that's how I came to knowledge of some of what was going on. Yes, a nuclear device was detonated 560 miles southeast of Charleston. It was taken out so that it would not be used against America by those in charge. And there was intent. And it was in the small parts of gathered information that they discovered the two generals in charge of the Army Ordnance and the nukes, and the one Admiral in charge of the Navy Ordnance, also nukes. In order to move radioactive material anywhere in America, there are huge strictures. There's amazing protocols, quite difficult protocols, that have to be honored in order for that sort of thing to take place. Add on to that even more strictures having to do with fissionable materials or nuclear devices. I mean, it gets crazy. For example, if you wanted to move by truck or by aircraft, although it's better to do it by truck, move a nuclear device via truck from one place to another, not only would you have people on the ground, you would have helicopters, you would also have jets up 30,000, 40,000 feet circling in case anyone tried to attack or tried to steal these devices. And so there would be overwhelming force available and ready, at the ready, for just such an eventuality. So the president orders these gentlemen to prepare 3 nuclear devices and have them moved, but inappropriately. Without the strictures, without the safeguards in place that protect everyone, the public from radiation, the weapons themselves from theft or becoming a target of a terrorist grab or attack, whatever. And these 3 gentlemen, contacting one another, by the way, they all were in contact, basically told the president, no, we will not do this because this is inappropriate. And in the small gathering of information that I mentioned earlier, in order for a nuclear device to be coupled to a rocket, there is a collar that is used. And each particular style of nuclear device has a particular caller. So you have to order the caller to be delivered, because these things are not kept together, and that's a safeguard. So you have to order the caller so that it goes over to where the missile is. And then, of course, the nuke is brought, and then the whole putting the thing together, the protocol has gone through in order to set up the device so that it's workable. So these three gentlemen found out, I guess, from someone like at the rank of maybe a sergeant or a corporal, that the order had been given that these collars be delivered to these three different locations, and these collars were meant for an EMP nuclear device. So an EMP device, of course, is a scary thing, because we know that an EMP properly placed in the perfect position for North America is for an EMP device is central to Nebraska, which would give us, if you look at a circle out from Nebraska, it would wipe out all communications, all electrical grid, transportation, food distribution, just everything related to computer systems, chips, or anything hooked up to the electrical system would be fried.
Yeah.
And this is what they put together, that, in fact, this is where this was going. This is where this movement of nukes coupling to missiles was, and other instructions, other orders given, they summarized that, in fact, something really bad was about to take place. And so they said no. And they were willing to take a bullet for the American people against the leadership when they discovered that, in fact, this would have put America in grave jeopardy. So that's the long and the short of the story. And the outcome, of course, is these three people were relieved of duty. But here's another element that you need to be aware of. Every 11 years, the sun switches polarity. When it switches polarity, there's a huge EMP, electromagnetic pulse, that comes out of the sun.
Yes.
The thinking is that the timing, because this was really close, this was meant to happen on the 7th or 8th of October. And if these two things had been timed, if an EMP device were exploded, or three, exploded over Nebraska, and this EMP, massive EMP from the sun, would have come, as it has for millennia, every 11 years, it would have wiped out to such a degree that within a year, would have wiped out our systems to such a degree that within a year, 90% of the American population would have died. That's 300 million people. By the way, if you count all the illegal aliens as well, that's 300 million people. This is major. And these people put it together because they're not stupid. These generals, this admiral, decided, look, we got to do what we have to do to safeguard America. And by the way, try and find these guys, because you can't find them. Even their families have been moved. So here's the interesting thing, though. For the first time ever in recorded history, the sun did not flip. The polarity did not flip as per normal. This has never happened. Every 11 years it does this. Well, the North Pole flipped. The South Pole fizzled. It never flipped.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yes, definitely.
So the EMP, which was, should have happened, never happened. So if you believe in God, three men stood up, did the right thing. God stood up and stopped the normal events that would normally happen in nature. Of course, he's nature's God and commands nature. But he actually stopped the regular rhythm of the sun from taking place and providing an EMP which would have given the timing perfectly for this event to wipe out, basically, the civilization in America. And are these facts? Yeah, easily discovered and trackable facts.
So this was an EMP device. That's why the yield was small. What, a kiloton? Yeah.
Yeah, 4, I think. Yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, it wasn't necessary to have a large event. because the Compton effect. Are you aware of that? The Compton effect?
No.
Okay. The principle is this: that in the upper atmosphere, when you turn on your microwave, it energizes. It causes molecules to actually vibrate, and that's where you get the heat from. It's the vibration of the molecules. Well, in the upper atmosphere, 800 miles up, if they exploded an EMP-creating device, the Compton effect would have taken place, and it increases the yield of the pulse into, I don't know the actual measurement, but it's many-fold, many times the increased yield of that EMP. So all of these factors put together would have been unbelievably devastating for America.
Didn't this wasn't there a grid exercise involving Canada, the U.S., and Mexico right around the same time?
Yeah, that never happened.
That never happened.
Yes. Yeah, lots of strange things. And you know that there's relationship to all of this. If one thing stopped another thing from happening just by virtue of surprise or whatever, if the intention was that one thing would lead into another or augment another, then we've seen some pretty interesting things happen. I mean, really, how often does the military actually stand up to the commander-in-chief and say, no? That's a rare event. And three of the top leaders, the guys in charge of the nukes did it. And then, of course, the sun itself. 22 years ago, that's 2 cycles of the sun ago, Quebec in Canada and the New England states, we had an EMP that wiped out the electrical grid.
Yep.
Well, that was 22 years ago. And that was the cycle that the sun was, supposedly going to go through again as it had for millennia. And, of course, it didn't for the first time. Amazing.
It's amazing how the squeaking wheel gets the grease. But, I'm really sick of all this politically correct stuff. Am I to assume that it was the chief executive, otherwise known as the President of the United States, who orchestrated this? Or what?
He's the only one who can order nuclear devices to be moved. He's it. His signature on the bottom line.
Jim, why did Lindsey Graham sing out like this? Did he just spaz out? Was this his version, in your opinion? I know you don't know, but was he singing out, hey, red alert, something bad's going on here? I mean, why did he just spaz out and say something like that?
I really can't fathom how he could mix up the facts if he was presented with the facts. I get the feeling someone shared with him a little bit of it, and he kind of stumbled in the starting gate when he got up to the microphone and did not, I've seen his actual, words, and, you shake your head, you wonder, where were you going with this? Because, boy, did this come out garbled. I mean, it was a garbled, whatever he was intending to say, sure, it didn't work right. It just seemed like a little bit of craziness, frankly. But he had a little taste of truth.
I was watching the Two Jakes the other night, and it's funny, I can't quote it, but Jack was saying, one of the Jakes, Nicholson said, the clues that are really useful to you is the piece of paper that falls out of somebody else's coat pocket at the cleaners. It's the wrong number that you dial in the middle of the night, while the clues that are, you stumble over the obvious ones that are right in front of you. And this seems to be one of those deals. I mean, this is beyond belief. So a nuclear device was removed without the proper procedure from Dyess Air Force Base, went to South Carolina, and this was in furtherance of detonating this thing right about the time that the solar poles were going to flip and a grid down exercise involving Canada, the U.S., and Mexico all at the same time. And somebody's going to say, You're just spouting more right-wing Christian-based nonsense, blah, 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 because I know I'm going to get it here in a minute, and frankly, I've ceased to care about that, because, like I say, the squeaking grease gets the wheel, and it's amazing how one strident voice out there can cause this ripple. It's like pulling the corner of a bed sheet. You give it a little tug and the whole thing moves,
Mm-hmm.
But this is beyond anything I could even possibly imagine that could be done.
It's an absolute shock that these kinds of events would take place. But I think your responsibility and my responsibility is to report the truth so the public is aware, that it came that close to the cessation of our society. And look, take a look. Let's look at another agenda. People say Agenda 21, which I really didn't know much about until I reported the litmus test of the military, the beginning of the purge of the military back in January 21st. I let that out. And, of course, then things went crazy on the radio and TV, people wanting to know, well, where'd you get that information? Are you making it up? No, I wasn't making it up. And then since then, we've seen a purge of the military. And we know full well that it's happening and it's systematic, and there are reasons behind it. We know somewhat what the reasons are. We're looking at a gentleman who wants people to bow the knee to him. And we have people who are saying, no, we will obey the Constitution. We'll obey lawful orders, but when they are not lawful, we will not obey them. And, of course, they're being removed. And these three gentlemen basically did that. They said these are illegal orders. They don't follow the protocols, the safeguards. We will not follow them. But I think your responsibility and my responsibility is very clear if we're patriots, and that is to put out the truth to safeguard people. I think that's part of our normal civic duty and then a Christian duty as well.
So Navy Vice Admiral Tim Jardina, second in command of the country's nuclear arsenal, got fired. And 2 days later, Major General Michael Carey, in charge of all the U.S. Air Force nuclear missiles, was also fired. And who else was fired?
Another general. I never name them.
I gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, 2 out of 3 is not bad. And we don't know where these men are.
Yes, we don't. We don't. But there are many people at high levels who have bug out bags and bug out plans and to safeguard their family and their people. I mean, I've heard of. Let me throw out a name from the past, Mr. Romney. You know that he has a place in Canada. Did you know that? The man who tried to be president and has a wonderful wife with a wonderful character who would have made a wonderful first lady. I like the Romneys.
Well, I understand the Bushes have 100,000 acres down in Paraguay or Uruguay or one of them down there in South America. Yeah,
but they have provisioned their place in Canada. It's near a place called Grand Bend, Ontario. They've provisioned it, to last for years for a whole group of people, their whole family, extended family. Now, why would people like that do something like that? Why would other people, governors, why would chiefs of police, why would politicians, why would business people, why would Oprah suddenly buy land on Vancouver Island, which she did just recently? I know the salesman. Why would all of these people start to provision and put things aside and make plans to survive an event? It's because they're afraid the event is going to take place. That's why. And they're not stupid. They're not silly. And they don't respond, I think, well to people with tinfoil hats. I think they're smart enough not to get caught up in that. So something is afoot. These events, I think, are precursors to where it could have gone. And we were spared.
And it looks like the Almighty had a hand in it. He's always doing stuff like that. It's sort of like, let me show you something. You think you're smart? Let me show you something. Can you stop a solar pole flip? I don't think you can, but I can. Watch this. Boom. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, that's what we should remember. As someone very near and dear to me said recently, don't worry about it too much. Father is watching. We'll be right back with our final segment with Dr. Jim Garrow on Coast to Coast AM. Is it true Dr. Jim Garrow is a former Nobel Peace Prize nominee? Is it true he was responsible for bringing the military litmus tests, whether soldiers will fire on American citizens, to light in early 2013? Did Dr. Garrow really report that Tom Clancy and Andrew Breitbart were basically assassinated by operatives from the current administration? When do we find out? When do we come back to him real quick for our final segment on Coast to Coast AM with Dr. Jim Garrow? Dr. Jim, is that correct? You're a former Nobel Peace Prize nominee?
Yes, sir.
Well, were they going to give it to you for being Canadian?
Hey, I'm joint. Come on, joint here. Born in Scotland, raised in Canada and the U.S. Yeah.
Bonnie Scott.
No, they
wow,
were.
That's cool.
Just because I was present.
Yes, that's it. Tell the folks who may not know about this military litmus test, because many of us know that it exists, and many of us feel that the military is being trimmed down and being stripped of anybody who will actually back the Constitution, and the administration seems to be going with people who will do what they're ordered to do, a la I was only following orders back in the old Nazi days.
Well, January 20th of this year, I got a call from a fellow I had known for, at that point in time, 17 years, and a senior military officer, a hero, a well-known name in the military, who was retired. But he called me and he said, Jim, I'm really upset. Some things are happening. People I brought into the military and have gone up the ranks with me and totally dependable are telling me that a question is being asked, and he called it the litmus test. That wasn't I didn't make that up. He called it that. And basically he said that they're being asked if in a scenario where you were being required to confiscate arms and go, like, say, door to door, confiscating arms from civilians, and the civilians refused, if you were ordered to shoot American civilians, would you do it? And that was the magic question. Now, of course, it's been changed somewhat as time's gone on, but that was what I was confronted with. We talked for about an hour. We came up with a plan. So I put it out on my Facebook site, and it went viral. And from there, I was interviewed by lots of radio and TV channels. But the point was that we were alerting America to what was going on with the military. We were also sending a very clear message to the military that legal orders you obey, not unlawful orders, legal, lawful orders. And that was the message.
Now, what about Tom Clancy and Andrew Breitbart? Those men passing away like that got people's attention. It seems like they sensed something was wrong there, but they didn't know what it was. They just sensed that it was, but no fact to back it up, just perception and not much more. But it's crossed my mind more than once.
Well, let's throw in another name, because all three are really tied together, and that we'd add Michael Hastings. Mm-hmm. So you have Tom Clancy, Andrew Breitbart, and Michael Hastings. Tom, I've known Tom since I was 17. Now, were you aware of that?
No.
Yeah, I was a lifeguard at a camp, a Christian Bible camp in Quebec. And these guys, one day I was just walking across there was a volleyball court, walking across the volleyball court toward my cabin. And next door, at the cottage next door, Dr. Teal owned the cottage. He was from Kennebunkport, Maine. He was a 95-year-old. Well, I used to go and start the motor of the boat for Dr. Teal so that he could go puttering around and do whatever. Anyway, there were these guys getting their motors ready, and the one motor that was problematic, which I knew how to start, they were having trouble starting it. So I went over and said, hey, can I help you? I know how to start this engine. And they said, sure, that'd be great. So I started it for them, and off they went. In fact, I even told them where to go fishing. Don't go to there. That's where the first boat took off. And I said, don't go there. There's better fishing over here, and I told them where to go. So they went. They came back. They had lots of fish. They shared some with me, and I asked them if they were going to Expo 67. Do you remember that, Expo 67?
Barely.
Big event, and in Montreal. And they didn't know much about it, but I said, well, girls, beautiful, beautiful girls. You want to go? I was 17. And the guy with the Coke bottle thick glasses named Tom was all for it. So the bunch of us, I went with another counselor and those two guys, and we went the next day to Expo 67. And that started a friendship with Tom Clancy. And, of course, who would have known that he'd end up writing books? He was just in school at the time, from Maryland. Anyway, Tom and Michael and Andrew were all killed and murdered.
Yes.
Different ways, but they knew things. They were working on a novel together. Information was being passed over to Tom. He was working on a novel that was going to expose a plot to place the president in place using the Saudi oil money, which starts with a 1979 article by Valerie Jarrett's father-in-law. Are you aware of that article?
No.
In which he postulates that the Arabs should be grooming and paying for up-and-coming black hopefuls who could be utilized by these people to spread the word. And basically it was about Marxism.
Yes, I know the one that you mean. In fact, I find it interesting that Nelson Mandela, who is a known communist, the flags flying at half-staff for Nelson Mandela. That's very interesting. Of course, if you say something like that, people automatically, there's a certain ilk that will begin screaming racist, but I would just scream back, no, I'm not a racist. You, however, are a racialist. And most people over here don't even know what that is because we don't use the term often.
Yeah, no, good call. Good call. So Tom was working on a novel that would have exposed all of this, that would have brought all of these fine elements together, including information about where Mr. Obama was actually born, proof of where he was born, and the plot on the part of his grandparents and his mother and a man named Obama over in Kenya, and, of course, hustling back from Kenya to make sure that her son would get all the best of American status. Anyway, quite the thing, and that's why they were killed. That is why they were killed.
You know, I was privileged to interview Michael Hastings on the program, I think back in February of this year, and when he was killed, because this one piece of surveillance video, you can see there's the primary charge. Oh, there goes the gas tank. Wow, there's the main charge right there. It's just 1, 2, 3, and this followed closely on the death of Philip Marshall, the guy who wrote Big Bamboozle, and also another one that was to be released posthumously, as it turns out, called Lakefront Airport. All about his, Contra running. He didn't run guns to him. He ran ammo to him back. And so Marshall's gone. Hastings is gone. Breitbart's gone. Clancy's gone. I mean, how much do the American people need to have their noses rubbed in these facts before they decide, you know what, I think we're way out here on the clothesline by and hanging by bloody fingernails? Yeah,
how much will it take? But, much of the information which we know, and I've got to say this, the intelligence community around the world, they know all this.
Yep.
They, of course, have reported back to their governments, and the leadership in their governments are laughing at America. They cannot believe the con and the hustle that's been played, and played well, and been highly successful, to the degree that we now have, somebody sitting in the White House basically performing all the duties of the president who, has loyalties that have nothing to do with America, that have loyalties to another country, another ideology. We're in a pickle.
Jim, I've just got to ask you this. it is said in Scripture, it's written in Scripture, that the day of the Lord shall come as a thief in the night. Nobody will know when the big day is coming. But a lot of people really sense that we are living in the end days, the last days. Do you have that feeling, or do you feel like there's no telling, it's liable to get a lot worse before the end of the world occurs? Or do you think we're getting close?
I really believe we're getting close. The events that are taking place, the things that are being lined up, it's undeniable. Who would have ever thought that Israel would find a larger pool of oil than all the Arab nations put together? And that's, by the way, I think that's why you've never heard of it. It is too huge. It is too much. And it provides too much of a clue as to why Gog, Magog, and the Arab nations would come after Israel. Now it's about real oil and real wealth and real provision, because all these nations, any of the industrialized nations, are going to need this oil. Who would have thought?
Would you agree that there is a war on Christianity? Because it seems that every chance that we know which establishments they are, starting with the educational establishment. We know that every chance they get to minimize Christianity within the framework of this country, they take it. They push others, but they're like, oh, Jesus, that's just a cartoon. That's a fairy tale. That's a storybook. Forget about it. Stupid. You know what I mean?
Our loyalties as Christians are very, very clearly defined. We offer our obeisance. We bow our knee to God only. And it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the God that we bow the knee to. These others are bringing in another God, the moon god Allah, for example, on the Muslim side of things. So they're decrying Christians. They're tearing apart. And it's very hard to tear the foundations of America, the Constitution, to tear it away from biblical wisdom and what is put in Scriptures, because the guys who put it together, they looked at that book, the Bible, in order to put together the Constitution. That formed the basis of America. And it was undeniable. They spoke of it freely. They argued it like crazy. They studied it like crazy. And they wanted every jot and tittle of the Constitution to reflect God's wisdom and God's provision and blessing for America. Their pact was with God. And it was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that they made this pact with. Bless us and we will serve you. And you know that that was the promise that was made by the founding fathers to God with respect to the blessing of God for America. Bless us because we will serve you.
All right. It's I don't know where to take it from here. I really don't. It's just I was really hoping that this would not be as serious as it appeared to be. I thought it was like, well, I thought there might be a back door here somewhere, but I don't think there is. I
agree. There isn't. I mean, it would be great if if you and I could joke and have a great little time here and a laugh and provide the listeners with, just a great time. But we were going down the road of reality, and you brought me on to talk about the realities that I've been part of, the things that I've run across, the things that I've done, putting out this whole thing of the litmus test and it taking place, the purge of the military back in January. People were not at that point in time paying attention. And I was decried all over the place for being some sort of a nutcase. This guy, who is this idiot? And then there were people who said, well, he's the guy who lost to Obama for the Nobel. Of course, he's just trying to get back at him. And here we are. We have presented to us fact upon fact upon fact that shows us the direction that things are going for the nation and the world. And we have good reason to fear, but we also have good reason to have hope and to stand up and say, not on my watch. We're not going to allow this to take place on my watch. Of course, that's what you're doing in your programming. You're bringing fact and hope to America and direction. And that's what people are looking for. I get thousands of emails every day. What should we do is basically the question that comes down. What should we do?
And what answer do you give them?
Stand up for truth. Stand up for the Constitution. Anyone who wants to argue something different, you need to go back to the roots of America and show the difference of what's being done and what's being expected, what's being allowed, what's being lauded and praised versus what the Constitution of the Founding Fathers wanted. Because, boy, have we departed. We're down a bunny trail way over to the left. And the end of that is Marxism and slavery, enslavement for us all. And that's where it's headed. And they, the elite, know better. They know what's best for us because we're just dumb hicks. Yeah, right.
You know, it seems it seems there's a strange psychology that works here. It's almost like if you don't care, if you've got a car with a nice paint job on it, if you really don't care and you just pull up somewhat carefully, try and leave the car on either side of you enough room to get out without denting your doors, you'll be fine. But if you park too carefully, you'll get dented. And if you park all the way over there at the back of the lot, somebody's going to go over there and key you. It's almost as though there's a jealousy for people who have, nicer things than others. So it's like, oh, you think you're hot stuff because you have this. But the reverse of that is the elite who have everything. They have all the money. They have all the power that goes with it. Why do they despise us who have so much less than they do? Because clearly they do. They send us into wars and don't bother to declare them, keep us in them for years. I mean, you don't need an IQ much above, say, room temperature to figure out that we have been involved in some sort of a conflict with very few years of breathing room between since World War II. Right after that was Korea. Right after that was, then we had the Cold War where everybody's quivering in their undergarments over when's the nuke going to come in and visit us. Then there was the Vietnam thing from 64 to 75. And then right after that, the Middle East thing starts heating up visibly, even though there'd been stuff going on over there for a long time. Then it really started heating up. And then the hostage crisis. Then the Russians go in. And then we go in. We apparently learned nothing from the Russians' experience in Afghanistan, for example. I mean, how do you reconcile just ongoing military involvement for decade after decade? And they promise the soldiers, oh, we'll give you education. Hey, if you'll come fight for us, we'll provide a pathway to citizenship for you. Just entice them with all these things, then they get wounded and all shot up and damaged and everything else, and then they're not very well taken care of when they come back. I mean, what's it going to take to wake people up? I'm thinking that it may take something so dramatic that you might as well keep sleeping because it's really kind of too late to wake up now.
Well, one thing we've lost is the notion of victory, that we get engaged in conflict in order to win. We've really lost. Why are we in these things? It's obviously not to win, but why are we doing it? Why are we putting the lives of our young men and women at risk and losing so many of them or damaging so many of them and their futures? Why are we doing this if we have no notion of what winning is about?
Well,
and then we tie
protecting an investment?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You just made me spaz out there. Is it just protecting an investment?
It might be. It just might be. But we certainly are tying their hands and sending them out to die. Boy, that just rips me apart when I look at what's going on. I'm not in the conflict. I'm too old. But man, when I look at these young people going out, loyal, patriotic Americans wanting to do what's best for the nation, but being used as cannon fodder, basically. For
yes.
what?
Jim, we're out of time on the program tonight, but we've got to talk again. Would you acquiesce to come back at some near point in future?
Absolutely, sir. It's a privilege. I'd love to.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you come on the program and speak these things. I think you've spoken things that everybody needs to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, there it is. Politically incorrect as it might be, or might have been, there it is. It's up to you now. It really is. If I drop off the scope, Come to caravantomidnight.com. You'll find me. In the meantime, with any luck, I'll see you tomorrow night. Until then,